Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the July 28th regular meeting of the Minneapolis City Planning Commission. I'm Matt Brown. I'll chair the meeting in the absence of the president. I'm joined today by Commissioners Gagnon, Kronzer, Bender, Lukey-Pierre, and Slack. And at this time, be sure to turn off any cell phones or other electronic devices or silence them. And our first order of business is to approve the actions from our July 14th meeting. May I have a motion to approve those actions?
Second.
Any discussion? In that case, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. And the actions are approved. Our next item of business is to approve the order of the agenda. So I'll go through the items. The agendas are on the green sheets of paper available in the hallway for those of you in the audience. So first, item number 1, sharing and carrying hands expansion, 401 and 425 7th Street North. We will discuss that item. Number 2, Blaisdell Apartments, 2118 Blaisdell Avenue. This item will be continued to the August 11th meeting. Item number 3, Carmel West at 312 West Lake Street. We will discuss that item. Item number 4, Precise Products Corporation Edition, 1201 Plymouth Avenue North. I will propose that we place that item on consent unless there is anyone here to oppose or would like to modify the staff recommendation on that item. Since there is no one, we will put item number 4 on the consent agenda. And then item number 5, which is a zoning code text amendment, we will discuss that item. So I have items 1, 3, and 5 for discussion. Item number 2, we will continue to August 11th. And item number 4, we will place on the consent agenda. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as modified? All right. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. And next, our next item is the Committee of the Whole consent agenda. We did not have a Committee of the Whole meeting on July 17th, so there's no agenda to consider. All right, next we'll start with the items to be continued, and I would propose that we continue item number 2 to the meeting of August 11th, 2014. May I have a motion to continue that item? All right, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and that carries. And next, let's see, we'll consider the consent agenda. So item number 4, Precise Products on Plymouth Avenue North. Again, if there's no one here to speak in opposition to that, I will open the public hearing for the consent agenda. Are there any further comments or anyone wish to speak on that item? In that case, I will close the public hearing. And may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? All right. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. And the consent agenda item is approved. Next, we'll move on to our items for discussion. Our first item for discussion is number 1, sharing and carrying hands at 401 and 425 7th Street North. We will start with a presentation from Ms. Farrar, and then I will open the public hearing after that.
Great. Good evening, Commissioners. Sorry, I do have a bit of a cold, so I sound pretty stuffy. I apologize. How much of a presentation would you like this evening? Is this being pulled for commissioner concern, or would you like a full presentation? What would you like?
I think the concern or question had to do with the sidewalk along 7th Street, so maybe if you could focus on that and otherwise provide a fairly brief presentation.
Okay, sounds great. So the two parcels that are before you this evening are 401 and 425 7th Street North. It is the Sharing and Caring Hands expansion project. The proposal this evening is to construct a new 3-story, 2-floor addition that's approximately 14,000 square feet to the existing facility, and it does require 2 land use applications. One, an amendment to the conditional use permit to allow 8 additional dwelling units in the industrial living overlay district, which also would reflect being 16 beds. I mentioned that in the background of the staff report. And finally, site plan review to allow for the new construction that's proposed on the property. The site is zoned I-2. It's in the Industrial Living Overlay District, as I mentioned, and it's also in the Downtown Parking Overlay District. It's a large site. It's approximately 6 acres, and it is a designated future land use of transitional industrial. So this is a subject parcel. This is the city-owned property here. There's a Sharing and Caring Hands Day Services building that's located across 5th Avenue North, and it's located in this building. Across the street, there is the large Herc facility, and kitty corner from the site is Target Field. The existing facility itself is 115,000 square feet in size. It currently has a total of 94 units. It is 3 stories, as I mentioned, and there are 154 beds. It is deemed to be a supportive housing related use. It was first constructed in 95 and then expanded again in 1999. The other use that's located on the development site that they propose to demolish is a single-story teen and children's center that's accessory to the supportive housing facility, so it's only for children and teens that reside in the facility. And that building, again, that's proposed for demolition was constructed in 1912. So going back up to this overall image, again, this is the building that would be demolished for the expansion, and you can see the large shape of the parcel, and this is in essence where the proposed addition would transpire. You can see here the building footprint area here. The remainder of the area where the building is currently located that is proposed to demolish would be some outdoor open space for residents, some playground areas, and also some landscaping. The question that had come up was actually regarding the sidewalk along 5th. And I did have conversations with Public Works. I know there was some concern about perhaps expanding the width of the sidewalk at this time, along with these land use applications as part of this project. That's not being proposed by the applicant. And in discussions with Public Works, they believe that us requiring anything this evening or Planning Commission requiring any additional width on that sidewalk would be premature. That entire roadway and the sidewalk along 5th, I can put this back up, will be constructed as part of the Southwest LRT improvements that are scheduled for the area. I did also attach some conditions of approval to the project. In my discussions with the applicant, they are willing to abide by all the conditions, so there's no contention this evening unless something comes up when they have a chance to testify. But we are again recommending approval subject to the conditions in the staff report. So I'll close here, but I can certainly answer any clarifying questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, any questions for Ms. Farrar?
Yeah,
Commissioner Kronzer.
All right. Thanks. Do you have the dimensions of the sidewalks both at 5th and 7th there? If
I do not.
the applicant can.
I don't have them off the top of my head, but I may have them on one of the plans if you give me a second to look. I don't see it necessarily listed on the plans that I have right here. They're probably in the civil plans, which I do have in the staff report. I can look back. I know the sidewalk is narrow in that location, probably 45 feet in width would be my guess.
All right, any other questions for staff? Seeing none, I will open the public hearing on this item. And actually, I'd like to ask the applicant to just speak very briefly. And please state your name and address for the record.
Come up and say.
Please.
I'm Mary Jo Copeland, the founder and director of Sharing Caring Hands in Mary's Place. And I've been downtown for 30 years helping God's poor. And I've expanded over the years, but this expansion that I want to do now is going to help the children have a safer place to play. And that building is 100 years old and it isn't really efficient. And so I want to put in a nice place for the kids to play. We have weightlifting equipment down there now, but it's kind of stuffed in a small area. And to put money in to try to expand it, it isn't efficient. And I want to add on 8 more units to the units I have down there to give some more families some transitional housing time to give them hope and peace, to rest their spirit and get on their feet and start over. Currently, we now have almost 500 people living at Mary's Place. 400 and some of those are children. And those children are safe there and they're happy there. They'll have a nice playground and everything for these children. It's so important that we give hope to people, and that's what I've tried to do for 30 years. And it's a nice place, and it's clean, and it's safe, and I've always kept it that way. So I'm hoping that you'll see that I can build it there. It's so important. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item, item number 1? Seeing none, all right. Please come forward. And please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Bob Salmon. My address is 501 Royalston Avenue, Minneapolis. I own a couple of properties across the street from Mary Jo's place, and I want Mary Jo to be able to do within her property lines whatever it is you people and her think is appropriate for that site. However, I think it's very important because historically, I've owned these properties for 9 years. I have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars cleaning up after Mary Jo's people with what they have done to my property, not anything else. There typically have been upwards to 1,000 people who would gather on an island between our 2 properties, which Mary Jo took no responsibility for. So we had to do some things on our own just to make it safe for employees to come down to the buildings. So I, like Mary Jo, want a safe haven for these children who do not have one. And if it's her place that we're going to have that, I just want the laws that I have to live by in my property across the street to be reiterated and to be enforced equally across the board. And at this point in time, when she's asking a favor from you, and she would not adamantly cooperate with the police or the city, and that can be checked up historically, you guys can check up on that, I think now is a good time for her and the city to learn to cooperate together so she can provide the services that she provides in a way that does not hurt the rest of the neighborhood and that everybody can survive in and she can thrive in. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak on this item? In that case, I will close the public hearing. And commissioners, we have 3 applications before us: a conditional use permit, a variance, and a site plan review. May I have a motion to get the discussion started? Commissioner Lukey-Peter.
I actually just had a question, whether anyone from Cunningham Group was here that could speak to the sidewalk width issue, because it's we can't tell from the packet what it currently is.
Right.
My name is David Ingleson. I'm with Cunningham Group Architects and represent Mary Jo Copeland and Sharing Caring Hands. The sidewalk issue on 5th, it's actually the first we've heard of the width, but we can accommodate that as we go here. That's not an issue to us. That room is, all that space now is going to be park and children's play area in that north part of the site.
Do you know what the current width is?
6 feet tops, I think, is my guess. But there's plenty of room to do whatever needs to be done there.
All right, commissioners, any other questions, or would someone like to make a motion? Commissioner Kronzer.
I'll make a motion to move item A and item B, conditional use permit, and I guess the variance has been returned, so we don't need to move on that. Is that correct? So moving conditional use, item A.
All right, is there a second? All right, any further discussion? All right, so we have a motion to approve the conditional use permit, item A. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, and that carries.
I'll continue. Recommend moving staff recommendations for the site plan, item C, with the addition of one additional condition. And that is all improvements along Fifth Avenue North be constructed to allow a 15-foot public sidewalk extending from the back of curb.
All right.
Could we perhaps get some reaction from staff and the applicant about whether that is feasible?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. Maybe I did not state it clearly at the top, but I was aware this question was coming about expanding the walkway width, and Public Works has said again, it's premature to do anything, given the fact that the entire roadway width and sidewalks will be replaced and improved shortly. So we certainly can't require, much like we don't require closure of curb cuts and other things without Public Work approval. So we could suggest that the applicant work with me to accommodate something, but to require it, again, based on Public Works feedback, would be premature.
So I can have some comments and to further articulate that, but if, I guess I have a question for staff. It sounds like we make motions that aren't necessarily approved by Public Works on this body, so I don't know if that's necessarily a requirement of us at this point, but I can certainly amend my recommendation for the condition if needed.
So Commissioner Kronzer, would you like to modify that language of the
Certainly.
seventh condition?
Seventh condition, staff work with Public Works and the applicant to provide a minimum 15-foot public sidewalk along Fifth Avenue North from back of existing curb.
All right. We have a motion and a second for item C, site plan review with 7 conditions now. Clerk, please call the roll.
Slack? Lipke Pier? What was that? Kronzer? Gagnon? Bender? So that's 5-0.
All right, and that concludes our business on that item. So we can move along to item number 3, Carmel West at 312 Lake Street West. And Mr. Ellis, maybe you could start with a presentation for us.
Certainly. All right. Good afternoon, Chair, Commissioners. Item number 3 is an application for a site plan review for a 42-foot by 75-foot second-story addition with a 25-foot by 42-foot covered roof, roof-covered deck fronting Lake Street West. Just as a note, the addition was originally approved 1 year ago administratively. It was to be set back off of Lake Street. The applicant constructed the porch roof portion, which cannot be approved administratively as it comes all the way out to Lake, triggering this application. So this item was continued from the June 9th meeting and then again from the June 23rd meeting to today. The applicant has extended the city's period of decision to October 1st, 2014. Let's see. The site is a split zone site. It is zoned primarily I-2 medium industrial with a small portion of C2 neighborhood corridor commercial district fronting along Lake Street, which is the portion where this addition is. However, the portion that is zoned C2 is less than 25% of the site and is also less than 5,000 square feet. So the entire site is treated as if it is zoned I-2 medium industrial. Future land use plan for the designates this site to be urban neighborhood with the small area plans calling for high-density residential eventually. So, There are some concerns from the neighborhood organization. They are here to speak about it, but I also forwarded an email that I received late this afternoon to the commission. So as an analysis, let me pull out a few things. There are three main areas of concern with the application where the applicant is recommending alternative compliance. The first is the 20% of non-building area being landscaped. So it is fairly close. The main issue that they're unable to do is they are required to provide childcare play areas as a result of the childcare centers. So staff is actually recommending that be counted toward granting alternative compliance with the condition of approval stated at the end that pea gravel or some other sort of pervious material be used in the play area that would allow drainage on the site, which would then take it to the 20%. For that purposes. Another issue is blank uninterrupted walls shall not exceed 25 feet in length. I do have a photo of the site here. It's this portion along the western side of it is blank uninterrupted. Staff is recommending alternative compliance be granted. The main issue being that this is actually along the property line there. This site could be technically redeveloped, and as well, building code would prohibit other openings or other issues within openings or other concerns such as that within 3 feet of the property line. And this is along the property line. And then finally, the final one is that the form and roof pitch of lines, the form and pitch of roof lines shall be similar to surrounding buildings. The kind of pyramid shape that you can see there below is not in line with surrounding buildings. So staff is recommending a condition that be removed and that there be a maximum of 42 inches, a 42-inch parapet around the wall. 42 inches meets the building code for fences or other sorts of things for security for mechanical equipment near a roof. So staff is recommending approval of the site plan review with the conditions outlined there. So.
All right, thanks, Mr. Ellis. Commissioners, any questions for staff? Commissioner Kronzer.
Yeah, thank you, President. I have a few questions. Can you explain to me how the parking lot in the rear and the entry off the rear works a little bit more?
Yeah, two different things here. I'll try to do it. So, yeah, sorry for the small site plan, but entry is actually off Grand into the parking lot in here along the site there, and I'll show kind of a plan. This is that sort of side. So here's the rear of the site, the child care center play areas, and there's the entryway to the parking areas along there. So, does that answer the question?
There's an accessible entry off of that parking lot, and there's no sidewalk to the public sidewalk to that entry. I went past there last night. Those gates were closed.
Okay.
So someone who's trying to get to that part of the building has to walk all the way around the block.
Okay.
I also saw that the parcel to the north is being parked for this facility as well, which was my next question is what's going on currently on site, and is this proposal to change what's currently going on site?
It is a kind of it's very convoluted as a result of sort of the parcel to the north and the development occurring that will be occurring and will be coming forward eventually at 2910 Pillsbury, which is Carmel Plaza, which will eventually come before this commission. So there's a parking lot to the north, and unfortunately, I was trying to find a good photo of it, unfortunately. There was a separate, not a site plan review, but it was basically a parking area design and maintenance through our preliminary development review process in order to bring that up to current parking standards. Because it was a similar owner, or the same owner, we did allow access to that location. However, that parking lot is primarily designed to serve what is occurring at 2910 Pillsbury. So while there is some overflow, we're trying to keep it from being technically connected to this application.
So my question is, there's chain link fence out there. There's probably barbed wire on some of it. That parking lot is unimproved essentially. So, and it's functioning as the same parking lot today, right now. So, To me, this seems like we're only seeing part of the issue when it comes to parking.
I'm sorry, say that
It
again?
seems like we're only seeing part of the parking issue on this application.
Yes, and I apologize for it. And it was, a lot of that has to do with the fact that the applications were to be separate with that designed to be parked for 2910. I apologize, I do not have the actual approved, it did go through preliminary development review. There is an approved site plan that needs to be implemented for that, that is designed to continue the same wrought iron fencing that we've seen along here. So it's
Okay,
designed
so
to.
there's an approval in place to upgrade
Yes.
and enhance that
Yes, there
that
is.
parking lot. Okay.
Yes, and it will park quite a few more. It will have the setbacks along where there is residential. Let's see here. So where we do have residential, there's one residentially zoned property on the block up here, kind of along the back. And here's that parcel in question that you're discussing, Commissioner. So there'll be some reflective setback along the alleyway, providing additional landscaping there, soften that. And then it will continue that wrought iron and landscaping along Grand there that will be proposed. And will also then along, I believe that's Pleasant, on that side, there will also be some additional landscaping along there.
So is there any control of the parking lot entry on Pleasant? Because there are gates.
There
the
will
grand
be,
entry.
yes, there will be
So
control.
can you kind of walk through how that's controlled and how that's operated?
I'm not exactly sure. I mean, they'll gate it. It would be up to the property owner on that. I'm assuming that they would close it beyond 10 or 11 at night. But I do not know.
Okay. Okay. Moving on. Is there a site plan with lighting on this application? I didn't see one. Do you know of any existing lighting that's already installed or what's being proposed?
Other than the building lighting, it's primarily lit by street lighting at this point.
Public street lighting?
Yeah, public street lighting, yeah.
The west facade along Grand, that's an existing facade with some doors. Is that not need to meet our window requirement for retail?
It is an existing condition and was not part of that portion, so I analyzed the portion of the second story. But this, go ahead.
It's an existing condition as a sign manufacturer, not as a.
Yeah, and they were not proposing, they were proposing additional, like the additional entryways, but not additional windows. The proposal at one point was to put a series of small shops in there, but it was zoned industrial, so that wasn't going to work. So they changed, and what triggered the original continuance was a proposal to put a third childcare center along that portion of it.
So what is the use along that portion?
It's proposed to be a childcare center. Currently, there's nothing in there. It was storage at one point. They were proposing mini storage originally. It was then going to be, it was then said to be wholesaling, which is, we've had some enforcement issues related to what's the difference between wholesaling and retail and small retail in the location. So small shops, et cetera, that you see in some of the malls in the area.
So staff's opinion is that it's not a change of use along that facade. Is that
Correct.
okay?
Although they will be, assuming that they complete all the conditions and receive approval, they would be able to put in a new childcare center in that portion of the building.
Without windows?
Correct.
Really? Let's stay on this picture. So what is that black thing sticking out of the roof? And is that mechanical equipment that would require screening, or is that something that's not finished yet? Maybe the applicant could discuss that.
I would leave that to the applicant to discuss. It could be mechanical equipment.
Okay, and my last question is about the mechanical equipment that requires an easement. Would that not also require to be screened?
Correct. More than likely, that was the condition of approval. I have yet to see the exact proof of it not going over the property line or some other sort of proof. It would have to be screened in that event, yes, but almost certainly it will probably have to be removed and pushed back into the building and ventilated along the top.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Commissioner Lupke-Peer, do you have a question?
I do. I actually, so I'm reading through the applications today, and I'm looking at the plans, and I'm just wondering if I look, for example, at the plans showing the west facade, I think we just looked at a photo of it a second ago. It looks like there's more doors proposed on the plan than there are currently on the building. So that tells me there's changes being made. Are we approving these changes today as well?
Yeah, that was one of the original issues for the continuance from the June 9th. We had some issues here I'll put in. So you can see here some original approvals where it was indicated as storage on the site plan as originally submitted. Then, unfortunately, I have a building permit that has been submitted, but it's sizably like this, where they were then switching it out to childcare center. Unfortunately, I couldn't approve or do anything along with that building permit until they received some sort of approval for the portion on Grand. And so the new one, so this is your modified by building request, is proposing no changes along there except any sort of egress requirements. They're going to kind of modify some of it to meet egress requirements, but we're not proposing additional windows or additional doors that was to modify.
Okay, because I have some concerns about approving something that's not really what we're looking at today. And then my second question is in regard to the 42-inch proposed parapet height. The elevation that we have shown looks to currently exceed that. Are they going to show how they plan to meet that requirement to see if it's, just so we know what we're looking at? Because obviously right now it greatly exceeds that. And the elevation that we have in our plans, it looks like it also still exceeds it. So I'm not quite sure.
The original, the applicant requested the higher one. Staff is recommending that removal. I don't have a specific plan, Commissioner, for that removal, but it would require to be removed, and we would verify. We would need additional submittals indicating, one, how that would be done, and two, what would be the final elevation.
Okay, and then so I have just two more questions really quick here. So are we, in essence, supposed to be kind of retroactively approving something they just built?
To a limited extent, yes.
Because I wonder if we approved, or if administratively something was approved that was, in theory, had to be designed by an architect and signed off by a structural engineer, and this is what got built, which is clearly very different from what you approved with the setback. I'm just not sure whether, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that. And my second question is and related to the daycare. So they might add a third daycare to the property?
That is correct.
Is the play areas that they are proposing, is that adequate for 3 daycares? Because I think the daycare, for example, my children go to is just one daycare, and they have more play area than this. So I kind of wonder how many children are going to be at this site, and whether, given the fact there's no windows in the other side that is called out as a daycare, where are they going to be playing?
Commissioner, it's my understanding that they are within distance, that they were able to take advantage of the distance within a park per the state regulations in terms of muscle area for children with child care centers. And so they were not proposing an additional child care center. I did bring that up with the architect when they submitted the application, and that was the response.
Okay, so yeah, okay. Just maybe if they do ultimately go through with another child care center in Grand, they maybe could address that if that was what they're proposing, because I'm just concerned that's really small. I thought it was small for one daycare center, but it's kind of alarming in my mind. So,
Commissioner, yeah, it is my understanding that they are meeting that. The state would license that and would check up on it.
Thank you.
Right, Commissioner Bender.
Thank you. Okay, so what we have before us is approvals of a structure that's already been built, and so I think you're hearing a lot of questions about how we are interacting with that. How will you ensure that what's been built is going to be taken down?
We do have a zoning enforcement staff, so the zoning inspector would write orders against that. There would be inspections along with the approvals, making sure that they meet the approvals. If they do not meet the approvals, we have a series of fines that we can do based on noncompliance. That begins with $200. A continued noncompliance doubles it to $400, then $800, then $1,600. And should there not be compliance, we could then go as far as $1,600 a day continuously until compliance. So it's primarily through fines and orders.
Okay. And then why is this coming forward now? What is it that we're approving that's different than what's been built? Are there use things that we are approving? Are we, as a body, giving, for example, I mean, this isn't, so they would need business licenses, for example, to operate any of the businesses within the building. So I guess I'm not really understanding why this is coming forward now after it's been built. I'm assuming it's because of our enforcement, but could you explain that?
Commissioner, yes, Chair, yes, it did come out of enforcement as a result. There were some issues we had with enforcement related to other things within the building, but primarily this structure and the portions there that bring it up to Lake Street then triggered the public hearing. And so it would be retroactively approving this, although staff is recommending that it be modified back. The porch, having a porch in and of itself is not an issue, or covered deck area there in and of itself would not be a concern. But staff was concerned about massing along Lake Street, compliance with the requirement that building roof lines be consistent along the street, et cetera. But primarily it was focused upon this portion, basically took it from an administrative application to the public hearing. And that's did come out of enforcement.
So the final building is going to have between 2 and 3 daycares, a restaurant, ice cream shop, coffee shop, wholesale storage, office, and commons area. And so those uses are all allowed as of right within this zoning. And then you're saying that the parking requirements for all of those uses have been met.
Commissioner, with the condition of approval that they can do a shared parking agreement with it. There's also the one issue that we would have. They were meeting their parking requirement. The child care center would put it over, which is why we have that condition of approval that's built in there, that they would have to, one, request permission to try to move the drop-off spaces onto the street with permission from the city engineer, as well as perhaps do a parking agreement within the uses that they can kind of share this parking lot. If they are unable to receive those approvals, they will be unable to move forward with the child care center. However, the use as it stands with originally being storage would still meet the parking requirement.
Commissioner Luppi-Peer.
Sorry, Brad, 2 more questions. So really quick then, so if what I'm hearing is if they don't build it the way they're proposing to build it now, they'll be fined. Are they currently being fined for clearly not having built it the way they said they were going to build it?
They have not as yet been fined, no. The application was submitted to remedy that. It took some time to get going, but once the application was then submitted, we did end up having to continue it a little bit longer. We were anticipating this be resolved by now.
Okay, and then lastly, is there a TDMP for the daycare traffic then that's been done that we could see if that's even remotely feasible, that they could use the street as a drop-off, or has that not been?
That has not yet been applied for, to my knowledge.
Thank you.
All right. Well, if there are no other questions for staff, I will open the public hearing for this item. And I'd like first to hear from the applicant or representative of the applicant. Please come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record.
I'm Rochelle Barrett on behalf of Caramel West LLC. And as Brad Ellis stated to you, we're here simply because that canopy addition over the outdoor deck area, which is a seating area, triggered it. Everything else was previously approved, including that second floor addition. It's already built. We have the certificate of occupancy for the entire building. It's there. The uses are existing. It's been in operation for over a year now. So it's just really the canopy portion that triggered us to be here today, and that's what we're trying to get approved retroactively. And if not, then we'll have to take it down. So.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
And is there anyone else here who would like to speak on this item?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Marion Bean. I'm Executive Director for the Whittier Alliance. I'm speaking to this issue. It has not been presented in neighborhood, but I've been familiarized with it through Brad Ellis and in talking with him over the past several months. There are a couple issues that I would like to address. We support the idea of reducing the canopy to a more consistent height with the rest of Lake Street. But there are a few other issues that we'd like for you to take a look at as the building operates in the neighborhood. We support the businesses that are there. We don't have an issue with any of them. It's more the operations and the application that we are speaking to. There is a lot of feedback that I get from the businesses in that area about safety issues and about people who are hanging around the back of the building and causing a lot of trouble. I submitted the information that came from Bin Lee about getting daily threats, about litter in the area. There was a shooting, and I was trying to get that information from the 5th Precinct, but the shooting where a man was sent to the hospital on June 8th was related to some of the people who are allowed to hang around the coffee shop and in that area, kind of that alcove area behind the furniture store and on the Grand Avenue side. So what I would request is that the owner be required to put in security cameras, have security patrol, put in motion detector lights, anything that might reduce the incidents that are occurring in that area, as well as monitor the behaviors of the people who are coming and going within the businesses. The daycare is obviously not a problem. It's not the kids who are the issue, but they are being exposed to some of these rather concerning issues. And one of the daycare owners was not very happy that a shooting had occurred in front of his establishment. I guess the other thing I would ask you to consider is the reduction of parking in favor of bike racks. Whereas we really support biking and bike use in the neighborhood, at this time I don't think I don't think the bike racks at this point would be utilized. And so the parking is an issue and the traffic will be an issue. And I think we need to look at this as kind of a campus-wide, Carmel campus-wide parking and traffic issue. So however we can accommodate that kind of traffic, and until there is more bike utilization in that area, how do we reduce that impact in the neighborhood? North of this building on Grand Avenue, it is residential. And it's a one-way going south. So there will be a lot of traffic. And if there's a third daycare, that will really put a lot of stress on Grand Avenue, the residents who live there, and the parking that is kind of fluid at this point. If we can require additional parking rather than granting the forgiveness for parking based on bike racks. And I think the other thing, just from a neighborhood, resident, pedestrian, tenant safety issue, as well as worker, the Minnesota OSHA, there's a lot of job safety reports that are public record. So any way that we can increase the safety of everyone in that area, I would ask that the commission take a look at what conditions can be applied to create a safer environment for workers and the residents and tenants of that facility. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commission members. My name is Zachary Matwire. I'm an associate of Mr. Sabri in many respects. I am also chair of the International Gateway, which is a newly formed business administration along Lake Street. We hope to soon be applying to the city of Minneapolis for special service district purposes. As chair of the International Gateway, I want to say that our association is in favor of the recommendation from staff. We also think that the development that occurred here at this site is an outstanding job that was completed. As the administration mentioned earlier, there was a lot of zoning issues because there was a lot of different zoning things going on there. There is all new water system in there, all new sprinkler system. The building is a safe building, and I also know from my association with Mr. Sabri that there are security cameras in the parking lot. There are also extra lighting in the parking lot area, and that there is security that patrols the location as well. We are also very happy primarily about the mural that is on Grand Avenue. I think you saw the mural that's there. And we believe that it is a most definite improvement to the beautification of the community in that area. I know that some people say that there's people hanging out, things of that nature in this area, but this building, along with other Carmel Plaza and other businesses in the area that are owned by Mr. Sabri, service the Somali community. And I heard one commissioner mention that he went by the other night and the gates to the parking lot were closed. One of the reasons for that primarily is due to the fact that this is Ramadan, the time of Ramadan. And the whole area is very, very busy at this point in time. It was obviously a security measure for them to do that, but there is another entrance and exit accessibility to the parking lot that was being utilized. But all I want to say, once again, as chair of the International Gateway, we are strongly in favor of this, as long as Mr. Sabri abides by everything and breaks down the parapet to 42 inches. We believe that he will not only do that, but he will do it in a beautiful way. The front of the building is beautiful now. It most definitely will have to be some other work that need to be done on it, but we believe that he'll do it, and he will do it and make it look nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And sir, could you provide your address for the record as well?
My address is 2848 Pleasant Avenue South, apartment 419.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other audience members who wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, I will then close the public hearing. And commissioners, we have just one application before us. That is a site plan review. May I have a motion to start the discussion? Would someone like to make a motion? Commissioner Lupier.
Well, I think I'm going to have to make a motion to not approve the staff recommendation. I don't feel comfortable approving something that isn't adequately reflecting what they're proposing to do. I don't know what this front's going to look like to meet the 42-inch requirement. I don't like the fact that there's a bunch of doors shown on the west side of the building that in theory won't be there. I think given the fact that we've already seen a discrepancy between what was approved versus what got built once, I'd like to for sure have something in writing that shows what is being proposed actually reflects the recommendations that we're going to be supporting. So I mean, I'm an architect. I can't in good conscience approve something that isn't even remotely reflecting what actually will get built. So until I know that what is actually on paper is what will actually result in real life, I'm not going to be able to support that approving of the recommendation.
Is there a second? All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? And Commissioner Lupier, do you have, and you kind of elaborated on your motion, but are there any additional findings you'd like to add to that?
Goodness. I feel like I'm having to approve, it's apples to oranges. I don't know what I'm even supposed to be approving here. So I don't even know how to articulate that in a finding. I've not encountered this before.
All right. Commissioner Gagnon.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate the traffic study that Commissioner Lipke-Pierre had mentioned, because that is a very highly congested area and with children involved. I have a child that goes to school not far from there and drive that area on a daily basis. And adding an additional daycare, I'm just not sure what kind of congestion. And there are two one-way streets. I mean, one butts up against this one side of the building. So just trying to understand that we know that it will work with the number of parking spaces and that we know that the traffic it'll be safe, because there is a huge pedestrian area too.
All right, Mr. Wittenberg.
Commissioners, just a reminder that what you have in front of you is a site plan review application. So if we could, in making a recommendation or taking action, if you could just make sure you're speaking to issues like windows, material compatibility, the roof line, landscaping and screening of the parking, circulation, those kinds of things. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Commissioner Lubke-Pier.
And I guess I can address really briefly. I'm not sure I agree with the alternative compliance for landscaping to the daycare area, just because I think that the daycare area is insufficient as well. So I feel like we're not really gaining an added amenity. It's insufficient as it is. So I don't think it is adequate to offset the alternative compliance required for the landscaping. I also am not sure about the exterior elevations and the height requirements. It's incompatible with the surrounding buildings, and I don't know what they're proposing that would bring it into compatibility yet, because it's not in front of us.
Commissioner Kronzer.
Thank you, President. I just also like to add the lack of a lighting plan to me is a very big issue. Typically we do see lighting plans on projects for site plan review, and certainly that's in a pedestrian area that's changing from an industrial zone to a fairly high pedestrian zone. Lighting is very crucial. There's actually pretty inadequate public street lighting in this area to begin with, so the lack of a lighting plan to me is something that's really required to understand the project. The lack of connecting entrances to public walkways as well, I think that's something that could and should be improved upon. Thank you.
All right, Commissioners, we have a motion and a second to deny the application for site plan review, and we've cited several reasons for that, including lack of walkways, connecting entrances to the public right-of-way, concerns about the meeting the findings of alternative compliance for parking lot landscaping, concerns related to the incompatibility of the building facade with surrounding buildings, and also the lack of information on lighting. So we have a motion and a second. Clerk, please call the roll.
Bender? Gagnon? Kronzer? Lipke-Pier? Slack? That's 5-0.
All right, and that concludes item number 3. We'll move on to item number 5, which is a zoning code text amendment related to 1 to 4 unit dwellings. And Mr. Wittenberg will start things off with a presentation.
Thank you, Commissioners. As Mr. Brown mentioned, this is a zoning code text amendment dealing with residential standards for 1 to 4 unit buildings throughout the city. I'm going to run relatively quickly through a PowerPoint presentation and then respond to any Commissioner questions in advance of opening the public hearing. And I'd like to also thank a number of people who've worked very diligently on this amendment. First of all, Councilmember Palmisano has provided great leadership on this issue, and she's walking in right now. I'd also like to thank Emily Ziering, the 13th Ward Policy Aide, who has put a great deal of time and effort into the amendment, and other planners in CPED who have contributed greatly to the amendment. Mei-Ling Anderson from Land Use Design and Preservation, Joe Giant from Zoning, Brian Schaefer from Long Range Planning, and Peter Crandall from Long Range Planning as well. And in addition to a team of planners who we've had working on this for the past several months, we've had a larger team of staff from a variety of departments, including Public Works, Environmental Health, the city's sustainability office, and the city attorney's office, who have convened occasionally to look at drafts and review recommendations. In addition, Commissioner Lipke-Pier has been involved with a group, with that group, as well as Linda Mack from our Heritage Preservation Commission. So with that, I'll go through a presentation that is just modified a bit from a couple of the public open houses that we've had throughout July. So just recent history leading up to the text amendment in front of you today. Earlier this spring, the City Council introduced interim ordinance that placed a moratorium on 5 neighborhoods in southwest Minneapolis that are experiencing a very rapid rate of residential demolition and new construction. That moratorium was in place for approximately a month before it was lifted upon adoption of a construction management agreement. Many of the most urgent issues that led to the introduction of the interim ordinance were really sort of livability issues around practices that we were seeing on construction sites related to the condition of those sites and noise, dumpsters, portable restrooms, that sort of thing. So the construction management agreement covers many of those issues, and builders have been voluntarily abiding by some of those standards that have not yet been codified, but that are also in progress to codify in other city ordinances outside the zoning code. We've seen some stepped up enforcement that has particularly been targeted at some of these areas that have seen a rapid rate of demolition and new construction. Going back a little bit further, this is the third in, I guess, a series of amendments that have affected lower density residential development in the city. In 2005, the city adopted the site plan review standards that you're familiar with, that are kind of the incentive point system, where you have to obtain a certain number of points from a menu of options in the site plan review chapter. In 2007, then Councilmember Hodges had introduced a zoning code amendment that addressed issues such as height, lot coverage, impervious surface, floor area, a lot of standards that one would think would have been in place well prior to that actually came into effect in 2007. Prior to 2007, there was not a maximum floor area for a home in Minneapolis. A new home could be built out to the setbacks, up to the maximum height, which was significantly taller than the height allowed today. And you could really cover a lot of the lot with a very massive home. So those changes made a significant dent in kind of the inappropriately scaled homes that we have seen in some parts of the city. But it's been clear that there is more work to be done. And that's what is in front of the commission today, is we think you have an amendment in front of you that is not as drastic in many ways as the 2005 and 2007 changes, but they really are a collection of numerous relatively small amendments that we think are reasonable and balance the needs of new homeowners with homeowners who are seeing new homes constructed next to them. This is a map of residential demolition and new construction activity just from last year, 2013. The yellow X's are sites where a demo and rebuild took place in the same year, where those permits were obtained in the same year. The red are all demolitions, not necessarily just red demolitions. And then the orange are new buildings, new residential buildings on vacant lots throughout the city. So you can see a pretty strong concentration of new homes, in particular in the southwest corner of the city. And this just further demonstrates what has happened kind of on an annual basis by ward since about 2007, with new construction particularly taking off in the 13th ward. Roughly half of the new homes citywide last year were in the 13th ward. And the total number of permits obtained for new single-family homes last year, I believe, was 147. So the text amendment in front of you is intended to ensure that our regulations affecting lower density residential development align better with the policy objectives in the comprehensive plan, which are covered in the staff report. We want to draft reasonable standards that result in improved outcomes for all of our neighborhoods and residents. And again, strike a good balance between the kinds of things that new homeowners are seeking in homes and the kind of scale and character that existing residents would like to see retained in their neighborhoods. As with any zoning code text amendment, but it seems particularly important with this amendment, we want to make sure that we're drafting regulations that are applicable and citywide, rather than just focusing on problems that we're seeing in one part of the city and trying to address those we want to address those in a very comprehensive way. We want to make sure we're drafting and adopting regulations that are easily understood by those who will be using them, including the staff and the public, and make sure that they're regulations that we can consistently interpret, administer, and enforce on a citywide basis. So I'll just get right into now some of the actual regulations in the text amendment. As I mentioned, in 2007, we adopted a maximum floor area ratio that is in place still today, that is a 0.5 standard. So on a 5,000 square foot lot, you can build a 2,500 square foot home. We're actually not proposing to change that. You'll see later in the presentation that we're proposing different measures to get at the overall bulk of a home. However, we are making a couple of changes that will affect homes and their compliance with the maximum floor area ratio. In 2007, one of the changes that was in place is that attached garages were allowed to exempt part of their floor area from the maximum floor area ratio, and we're proposing to eliminate that exemption. Essentially, building bulk is building bulk, regardless of whether it is attached garage or not. So we're proposing that all of an attached garage be counted toward that maximum floor area. And you can build up to a 676 square foot garage on a standard size lot in the city. A big point of discussion has been how much the basement level of a home sticks out of the ground. I think there may be some pictures that were submitted by residents that are in your packet that express concern and show some differences between new homes and nearby homes, and how much higher the first floor elevation is above adjacent homes, and that can really affect the character of a block in a negative way. So we're proposing to drop that standard from 4 feet to 2.5 feet. In other words, if your basement level sticks out of the ground for more than 2.5 feet for more than 50% of the perimeter of the home, we would count that basement as part of the floor area of the home. We have written in an exemption that can, the standard of 2.5 feet could potentially cause a problem when in complying when you're on a sloped lot, because if your first floor is just slightly above the ground at the front, say, and you have a couple of steps going up to that first floor, a sloping lot could leave a lot of the basement level exposed. So we're proposing that on a lot that has, I believe it's 3 or 4 feet more of grade change on the site outside the required front yard, that the 4-foot standard that's currently in place would apply to those properties still after this amendment. We looked at hundreds of homes that have been built in recent years to get some data to help inform our amendment. This is just an example by sector throughout the city of the floor area ratio, the average floor area ratio that has been constructed in recent years. The largest homes, as you might expect, are being built in Southwest Minneapolis with the average floor area ratio of 0.427. And the average overall floor area of a home has been roughly 2,500 square feet. We're proposing some changes to the maximum allowed height. The current allowance is 30 feet, and that's measured from the peak of the home on a gabled roof to halfway between the peak and the eave. We're proposing to drop that by 2 feet down to 28 feet and introduce a new limit to the peak of a home as well, which would be 33 feet. Right now, we're seeing some homes that comply with the 30-foot limit at the midpoint that have a very steep roof pitch and can get a peak that really towers above neighboring homes and other homes on the block. It's important to note that there are some exceptions to both the floor area and height rules that we are proposing to retain and keep in place. If you are proposing to build a home that exceeds the 30-foot height limit, now proposed 28-foot height limit, or exceeds the floor area limits, you can demonstrate that a majority of the homes within 100 feet of the property also exceed those standards, so you can build to that context if that's indeed the case. The last thing we want to do is prevent homes from being built that actually match historic context in certain neighborhoods. Lowry Hill is the example I give frequently, where we have relatively large homes on fairly modest sized lots, and a number of them do exceed that maximum floor area ratio of 0.5. And just here's some data from recent years on the height of homes, with the average citywide being about 24 feet. And about 7% of the homes that have been built in recent years would have had to have been altered or reduced in height under the proposed rules, had the proposed rules been in place. And about just under 9% would not have met the newly proposed limit of 33 feet to the peak of a roof. So we feel like the regulations that are proposed are really kind of getting at the worst offenders, I guess, for lack of a better term, the homes that are really being built in a way that is out of scale, typically with neighboring properties. Again, there are exceptions built in based on context, and one is able to apply for a variance from height and floor area standards in cases where a grade change or some other condition may be causing practical difficulty. We're proposing some changes to side yard setbacks, and we're proposing that those be based on the width of a lot. So the more lot width you have to work with, the idea is that you can stay a little bit farther from your shared property line with your neighbor. This is still a point of discussion that we're having with some policymakers who have raised the issue in the past about particularly wide lots and whether we are requiring enough space on those lots. We're in the process of kind of mapping that out to see what the full effect of requiring even larger setbacks would be on particularly wide lots. But right now, the proposal in front of you, the interior side yard setbacks would top out at 8 feet on lots that are over 62 feet in width. And of course, the typical Minneapolis residential lot is in the 40 to 42, 44 foot range. Just some graphic examples of some of the regulations that we're talking about, existing and proposed. We can just scroll back and forth a little bit to see the change in floor area and basement height, what we're proposing. Again, dropping the maximum height at the midpoint from 30 to 28, establishing a new limit of 33 feet to the peak. The basement issue of lowering the allowance from 4 feet to 2.5 feet before it's considered floor area. And this just demonstrates, again, the overall change in bulk that would be mandated, I guess, on a typical Minneapolis lot. And interior side yard setback requirements, again, increasing as the lot width increases as well. Site plan review standards, these are the existing standards in place in order to obtain zoning approval when one is seeking a building permit. You have to, among meeting other standards, obtain at least 15 points off of this menu of items. And again, this was adopted in, I guess, almost 10 years ago now. There have been some minor changes, but for the most part, this is as was adopted almost a decade ago. And just a graphic example of some of those standards. And this slide shows the percentage of homes that have been built between 2009 and 2013 that have obtained the points from each of those standards. And the proposed site plan review standards, the standards incentives highlighted in green are either brand new to this table or are being amended in some way compared to the standards currently in Table 530-2 of the zoning code. Proposing to really emphasize high quality materials in meeting with policymakers about the amendment. That was really something that we heard on a regular basis, is that people feel very strongly about creating an incentive for high quality building materials throughout the city. We're proposing to give points to sort of match the contextual height standard in an area. So if you are building within the predominant height of homes within 100 feet of the site in question, you would also get points in this new incentive system. We're proposing to make the tree incentive much more meaningful. Right now, you can clear cut your whole site and plant a small tree in your front yard and get a point for that. We're proposing that you would get 3 points for retaining or planting a certain number of, a certain diameter of tree caliper on your site, essentially. So per 1,000 square feet of lot area, you'd have to either plant or retain, preserve 3 inches of tree caliper. So if you, that standard will essentially create a pretty strong incentive to retain trees on the site. If you don't, you're going to be planting a lot of 2.5-inch trees, for example, on a property. Window requirements, we are not proposing to change. Detached garage incentive, we're proposing to create a little bit stronger incentive to maintain a backyard with a detached garage back along the alley or back of the property. We've seen some garage placement that maybe hasn't really been consistent with the intent of what we're looking for. So this would further lay out the standard that is clearly outlined in, as the pattern that we're looking for in our comprehensive plan. Still would have an incentive for basements, but I guess the reason that's highlighted here is that we're also proposing new regulations that would allow the building official to deny a permit for a new home where it can't be demonstrated that the basement would maintain a sufficient distance between the water table and that lowest level. And retaining the front porch incentive, again, where that's contextual. You're all familiar with alternative compliance in the site plan review applications that come in front of you. However, there has not been a alternative compliance provision in site plan review regulations affecting 1 to 4 unit buildings. So this would be a new thing for administrative reviews of homes. Essentially, if someone is proposing a design that cannot or would not achieve the minimum number of points off of the site plan review standards that you just looked at, someone can demonstrate that they should be granted alternative compliance based on the 4 criteria listed here. That the scale is consistent with the scale of surrounding homes, that they're either incorporating traditional design features or perhaps for a modern home demonstrating that there's exceptional creativity and high-quality materials in the design. That the proposal is responding to any changes in the topography of the site, and that it's consistent with the applicable urban design policies of the comprehensive plan. And then I'll just note that if someone does request alternative compliance from those requirements, that there would be a notification that would go out to nearby property owners, giving them an opportunity to review and comment on the request. Other changes in the code text in front of you, relatively modest reductions to the amount of a lot that can be covered by buildings, as well as impervious surfaces. We're proposing a change that would eliminate from consideration a home that sits at the back of a lot when we're doing what people sometimes refer to as the string test to determine a front yard setback. In other words, if there's one real extreme outlier on the property, we can exclude that outlier from consideration in determining the next door neighbor's front yard setback requirement. Proposing somewhat larger patios allowed in front yard setback area, keeping in mind again that we're proposing to reduce the overall amount of a lot that can be covered by impervious surfaces. And this is currently the practice, but we're just clarifying in ordinance that when you are essentially doing what people refer to as a virtual tearing down so much of a building that it is that what you're building back is considered a new home, that you don't get to take advantage of any non-conforming setbacks that might be 3 or 4 feet off that side property line. That if it's a new home, per our regulations, it has to comply with the setbacks required for a new home. We currently limit the amount of a front facade that can be covered by a garage facing the street. 60% sounds like a lot, and we certainly gave strong consideration to dropping that down to 50%, but we're really concerned that that would be inviting a number of variance requests, because when you do the math on a standard sized lot in Minneapolis, on a 40-foot wide lot, if you don't have alley access, an attached garage facing the front, you do a maximum width house, that only gets you an 18-foot wide garage. So we, again, gave that very strong consideration, but are ultimately proposing to leave that standard in place, provided that we would also apply it to basement level tuck under garages where much of the front yard is excavated and that garage becomes more of a dominant feature of the streetscape. Currently, that 60% limit does not apply in those situations. And we're proposing to just flat out not allow curb cuts if a residential property does have alley access in the future. If you have some sort of extreme grade change or something like that that prevents you from accessing the property through the alley, that will be the case that you'll have to make through a variance process. We are proposing a small change to our definition of half story. If you have questions, we can certainly get into the details of that. Amending our definition of demolition. Right now, this is only a definition that's in our preservation regulations. We're proposing to introduce it to our zoning code, and we will follow up with also amending our preservation regulations to align with that. Essentially, it says that demolition means you're removing 60% or more, or 60% or more of the structure. And that has been vague enough that it has caused an awful lot of disagreement between staff and builders about what 60% is and 60% of what. So we're proposing a much more precise definition that gets at exactly how much the roof constitutes in terms of a percentage of the overall structure, and that we're counting only the exterior linear feet of the building. It removes from question whether we're including interior building walls, for example, in that calculation. And as I mentioned earlier, we're proposing to address the issue of basements that conflict with groundwater. And this is just a summary of a number of the quantitative things that we just covered. I'll just mention in terms of public process that has taken place above and beyond the internal staff level work that's been done. The 13th Ward office convened some focus groups in Southwest Minneapolis that addressed a number of concerns about new home construction in the area. We had an excellent meeting with the Residential Architects Committee of the local AIA. They had some very good suggestions, some of which have been incorporated into the amendment. We've had 2 open houses. We had an industry open house on July 10th that was geared more toward builders, real estate professionals, and architects. So we have gotten a little bit of feedback since then. We have addressed some concerns that were raised since that time. But for the most part, we've gotten relatively positive feedback from the industry with some, I would say, a few minor concerns that perhaps you'll hear about tonight. And then we held a public open house on July 16th, and again have done some minor tweaking since that time to address concerns and issues that have been raised. So staff is recommending approval of the zoning code text amendment in front of you. I think it amends 10 different chapters of the zoning code. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Wittenberg? Well, I have a question pertaining to the side yard setbacks. Obviously, making that change would create many non-conforming setbacks among existing homes in the city. What is the process for if someone wanted to construct an addition and continue that existing building line? Is that something that can be approved administratively?
Chair Brown, thank you. That's an excellent question. And the answer to that is yes, our nonconforming uses chapter has a provision that allows one to add on basically straight up and straight back in line with a nonconforming setback, as long as that house is at least 3 feet off. That was a provision that was adopted maybe a decade ago, and after approving a lot of variances for people who simply wanted to match an existing setback. So yes, there is a provision in the ordinance.
Commissioner Kronzer.
Yes, I also had a question about side yard setbacks. In the table that refers to the varying degrees of setback versus lot width, is there assumption that it's a full 140 odd depth lot versus something that might be 90 feet or with a interior side yard house that is between that corner yard and the alley? I wonder if there needs to be clear that this numeration here is related to a regular depth lot versus not a lot that might be shorter, which obviously would have triggered a variance request, but at least there's some language in the ordinance that this is related to a standard lot size for depth.
Commissioner Kronzer, we have given that some thought. The overwhelming majority of lots in the city, of course, are much deeper than they are wide. But there are certainly lots out there that are extremely wide but don't have a lot of depth to work with. The ordinance doesn't distinguish between those, and I'm not sure how we would exactly without making it extremely complicated, but we could certainly give that some more thought before this gets to committee.
And I had one other quick question, which might be extremely premature, but the accessory dwelling unit ordinance is working its way through the city process. Do you see this aligning with that ordinance proposal, or if there's any things that you see that we should pay attention to when that ordinance is moving forward that may or may not be in conflict with each other?
Sure, Commissioner Kronzer. Our staff who are taking the lead on our accessory dwelling unit ordinance have definitely looked at this, and we've had that in mind as we've written this, and we certainly don't anticipate any kind of conflict. Even more restrictive impervious surface and building coverage rules, we believe will certainly accommodate whatever we come up with for accessory dwelling units.
All right, if there are no other questions, I will open the public hearing. And again, please, if you wish to speak, state your name and address for the record.
Hi, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, my name is Martha Hewitt. I live at 5124 Vincent Avenue South in Fulton, Ward 13, and Linda Varvel and I have lived there for 22 years. I'll keep this brief. I just wanted to say that I really strongly support the proposed amendments for the reasons that are stated in my letter that was attached to the staff report. I'm not 100% convinced that they're going to resolve all of the concerns going forward, partly because of the reasons that I stated in the letter, and also of issues that are maybe not quite nailed down or cranked down as much as they could be, and also because I think the developers are so creative. But I do believe that at this moment in the history of the process, that Councilmember Palmisano and her staff and Mr. Wittenberg and his staff have developed changes that really do aim at a fair balance between what existing homeowners like myself want and what new people who want to build new, bigger homes in the neighborhood want. So I strongly encourage you to approve the amendments and to have them go into effect as soon as practicable.
All right, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on this item?
Good evening. I'm Julia Parenteau. I am the Government Affairs Director for the Minneapolis Area Association of Realtors, 5750 Lincoln Drive, Edina. And I am here on behalf of our industry, my friends at the Builders Association, and all of our homeowners that we represent, just to offer a little bit of feedback. And I want to thank Councilmember Palmisano and, of course, all of the staff who's been including us in the process of developing all of these new proposals. And, you know, I think for the most part, we have a document that everybody is really supportive of, you know, just by the mere fact that there aren't 300 industry people behind me probably is a good thing, right? The feedback I've been getting is that our industry representatives, the folks who do the work, do the building, and the homeowners they work with feel very positive about what's been written here. There's just a couple of minor things that I think we could continue to talk about before moving to approve everything. I think we could spend a little bit more time thinking about the side yard setbacks and just looking at whether a 1 foot step for each of these segments is the most appropriate way. I referenced the city of Edina, who did this last year, these kinds of revisions, and what they looked to do was, rather than going by 10 feet, then it's one additional feet, they did a ratio so that anything 60 feet, or actually it's 60 feet to 75, it goes by an additional 4 inches of setback per foot that the lot increases. Granted, the city of Minneapolis has a significantly, overall, much smaller lot sizes, but it could be an interesting way to look at those few that are a little bit bigger. The other point that we are still a little caught on is actually the removal of the 250 square foot of garage space in the floor area ratio calculation. And the concerns that I heard about that from our industry folks related to what they are getting asked to do from people that are aging and people that are disabled, who see an attached garage as a necessity for their ability to use their home in the future. And as we look to a population that is aging and wanting to keep a diverse spectrum of people in our city, I think it's important to consider whether or not the spirit of encouraging traditional detached garages is worth the harm it might cause to those communities, should they not be allowed to build the type of house that they want. 250 square feet is a single car garage. It's a small space, and it's only a portion of what you're actually allowed to build for a garage. And so the point we would like you to consider there is whether or not that is something that should actually be removed, or included in the floor area ratio calculation. So I would welcome any questions on that. But otherwise, like I said, we do feel very positive about the proposal that's here before us, and are very thankful that we were able to take part in the conversation up to this point, and plan to continue to do so as it moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hello, Commissioners. I'm Tim Quigley. I'm an architect and South Minneapolis resident. I live at 3200 West Calhoun Parkway. I appreciate the work and effort that has gone into this text amendment proposal. I just don't happen to agree with most of it. So I'll be the naysayer here tonight. I do agree with the modifications to the current design standard point system. The current one has frustrated me for years, and I found it deeply flawed. The current system outlaws 2 Frank Lloyd Wright houses on the Minneapolis landmarks rolls, and would outlaw, or at least be out of compliance with all sorts of landmarks, residential single-family landmarks. So it seems to me something's wrong with the system like that. But again, under this proposal, that system at least is improved. But the downsizing proposals that are being discussed here tonight, I think, are too extreme, too coercive, too short-sighted, and a gross overreaction. This is the second time we've downsized in 7 years. And this downsizing, as was just pointed out, with the garage no longer amended or no longer included, makes a 20% reduction in floor area above the first floor, on top of presumably doing 10 or 20% 7 years ago. So we're downsizing our houses by 30 to 40%. And I just ask you, is that really what we want to be doing? My other concern is the height rules, actually. They are tight, very, very tight. I guess what I really am concerned about is that this is not something that's neighborhood by neighborhood, where it might make some sense. But this is sweeping throughout the city. It doesn't matter the size of the lot. It seems to me we're really outlawing Kenwood, Lowry Hill, the Lakes District, Prospect Park, Tangletown, in the way they're currently built. We're saying, no, that's not good. These are some of the most desirable neighborhoods in the city. So I really wonder, do we know what we're really doing here? So I think the idea that one size fits all is not really the way we should be proceeding. I think the rules should be made more elastic, just like zoning districts are very elastic. What's needed perhaps is a bonus system that I know some jurisdictions have, so that the desirable traits would allow a bonus in square footage or a bonus in we'll say, bulk as far as overall heights. And I guess I always make this plug for architects. If quality is really the issue, and the fact that a lot of these houses are, quote, ugly new houses going in, changing the character of these neighborhoods, then require these houses to be designed by architects. Certainly the city requires mechanical systems to be worked on by licensed city, not state contractors. One could do the same and have a higher standard in the city, so it's not just draftspeople. But I really think that there's something else going on about enshrining the status quo of, frankly, Southwest Minneapolis, Fulton, and I think that's silly. I think these houses are, by and large, functionally obsolete houses. I own 2 of them. I know. It's hard to raise a family in them. And they're energy hogs, and the detached garage enshrining the detached garage, I think, is a mistake. It's a historical pattern in Minneapolis, yes, only because cars blew up. Gasoline was considered a huge fire hazard way back when. And, of course, historically, carriage houses were detached because there were horses. So that's why we have that feature, and it's a historical anomaly, and it's, I think, a safety hazard for people of all ages. But I will stop. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this item? Yes. And please state your name and address for the record.
Hello, my name's Daniel Barnes. My wife Elaine Wilson and I own the house at 3836 Upton Avenue South. We've lived there since 1998. I just have two comments. One is I'm glad to hear that the new regulations start to address sloping lots. My lot slopes 10 feet from front to back, and the old regulations didn't really address slopes at all. The new one probably could be more specific about what works on a lot like that, but it's a step in the right direction. Secondly, I'd like to ask regarding the tree planting changes, whether would be adequate inspections for that, given that your home could be approved in the winter and you couldn't plant your trees then. There would need to be follow-up after the growing season starts or the planting season starts. It's a practical matter. I hope the staff has been into that already, but if not, I hope to get it on the table. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. And commissioners, we have a zoning code text amendment before us. May I have a motion to start the discussion? Commissioner Kronzer.
I'll move staff recommendation to approve the zoning text amendments amending chapters 520, 525, 535, 530, 531, 535, just said that, 541, 546, 547, and 548. Further, recommend chapters 529, 530, 536, 537, and 551 be returned to the council member.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. We have a motion and second. Commissioner Lupke-Peer, would you like to start the discussion?
I just want to briefly speak to this. I know how hard everyone's been working on it because I was at most of the meetings and how diligent they were about gathering so many different perspectives on the issue. And while I'm very much in favor of what Mr. Quigley proposed in terms of architects designing the houses, because obviously I have a bias in that. I will say, though, that this isn't perfect, but considering we have to create ordinances and amended zoning code for the entire city. So I know there was very much thought given to how this impacts South Minneapolis and also how it impacts North Minneapolis, because what could benefit one greatly could also be detrimental to the other. So I'd have to say that it can't be perfect because it is one size fits all, but I think given the range of variables it's had to address and the different needs and desperate needs of the different communities that it has to address, it's a pretty darn good solution. I mean, I think we're definitely on the right path. So while there's things that I think could be improved on in one way, I kind of look at the other side and see how it would impact other areas and think maybe it's kind of the most reasonable compromise that can be reached to still maintain what we want is a desirable city in Minneapolis. So I'm going to support it based on that and the fact that it's not perfect, but it's as darn close as I think we're going to get.
All right. Thank you. Does anyone else have any comments or questions? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. Clerk, please call the roll.
Slack. Lipke-Peer. Kronzer. Gagnon. Bender. 5-0.
All right, and that motion carries. That's the last item on our agenda needing action. We have a committee of the whole meeting this Thursday, the 31st. Does anyone else have any business that needs to come before the commission? If not, I have one item, and that is I understand our clerk, Lisa, is celebrating a birthday today, so I would like to wish her a happy birthday. Yeah. I don't know. All right. So that wraps things up. Our next regular meeting is August 11th, 2014. So thank you. And this concludes our meeting.